Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jono White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, the most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jono White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jono White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up to just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Today's guest is Rocki Howard. Rocki is the Chief People and Equity Officer at the Mum Project and host of the Voices of Diversity podcast. Welcome to my podcast, Rocki.
Oh, I'm so honored to be here, Jono. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to chat with you. I think already before pressing record. It's been wonderful to have a quick chat and get to know each other. But for our listeners, can you fill everyone in with a bit more information about what you do in your role at the Mum Project and with your podcast?
Absolutely. So, hi everyone. Like Jono said, my name is Rocki Howard. I identify as she, her, Black, Christian, Gen X wife mom. I am honored to be the Chief People and Equity Officer at the Mom Project. If you're not familiar, the Mom Project is a US based company where we really help to um, get moms back to work, right? And to create equitable environments and to place moms in equitable companies and environments who are really looking um, to actually create cultures that are welcoming and understand the multiple dimensions and needs of mothers. So we create communities for moms, we host events for moms, we have our work labs and our research division, we have our momproject.org, which houses our Rise, where we upskill moms with a focus on women of color. So our organization is an incredible organization. And my role within the organization is to make sure that our culture is a high performing, inclusive culture where people can thrive and really worry about nothing but being in service to mom. As an equity officer, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging are very important to me. I've been doing that work for quite some time, and that's how the Voices of Diversity podcast was born. The purpose of the Voices of Diversity podcast is because I think when I'm in work mode, maybe not so much at the Mom Project, but prior to coming to the Mom Project, when I was in work mode, what I find is
Yeah.
when I'm having all of these conversations about diversity and the spectrum of that, it's working within the systemic issues that you have. And it's, and what I recognize and what I believe is that changing the diversity narrative is a hearts and minds issue. And I
Mm.
found I wasn't spending any time talking about how inequity, racism, bias, and all of the byproducts affect John and Mary and Sue. And those are the conversations I wanted to have. And I believe if you can do that, it actually helps people to understand the struggle. So the Voices of Diversity podcast is a podcast where we talk to people from multiple dimensions of diversity, and they talk about from their perspective what their journey has been like in corporate America, and they give advice for those of us who are allies and want to help and support. So, all that being
Mm.
said, there's one more job I do. It's the most important job I do. I'm a wife and mother of four.
Incredible. Yes. Well, and you were just saying that you've got a birthday coming up for one of your kids, and I was just commenting that they're out of the teens from 20 to 31. So, whereas I'm coming in the next few weeks, my wife Liz and I are expecting our first. So you're moving into one season, and I'm moving into another. It's just amazing how that happens, isn't it?
It is. And let me just tell you, enjoy every moment because it flies by fast. And so it's really hard for me to
Mm.
believe. So my baby, my son, he hates it when I call him my baby, but he is the youngest,
Yeah.
turns 20 this Monday. And then a month from now, my second daughter turns 30. So we've got big milestone birthdays coming up in the Howard house.
Wow. Yeah, you do. Well, happy birthday to your two kids turning 20 and 30. They are big birthdays. Very exciting. Um, so I'd love to hear some of your story, Rocky. And it's always a real honor to do that when you have your own podcast and you're chatting with people about their stories. But let's chat about Rocky. Tell us about some of the moments that really shaped you becoming the person and the leader you are today, even as far back as your childhood.
Yeah, it's a very interesting story, and I like to tell it because I think in today's world, Instagram and social media really has us thinking that everything is perfect and easy, and it has an unrealistic benchmark. And so a lot of times I think we see where people are at a point in time in life, and we get to see that through the lens of how people want us to see it, but it's not always realistic, and it doesn't tell the whole story.
Yeah.
And it also sets up very false expectations for us. So my story is one where I grew up in a lower social economic circumstance. I was I had a parent who by today's standards would probably be diagnosed as bipolar, and as a result of that she was abusive, right? And it was a tough
Wow.
situation to grow up in. And
Mm.
it really impacted. I say this because you have to make some decisions, I think, about life and how you approach life, and being in that situation and growing up in that situation, one of the things that I recognized was that work was going to be my way out. Right. Like I grew up like some girls grow up and dream about Barbie dolls, some girls grow up and dream about getting married. I grew up and dreamt about getting a job and being able to get myself out of that set of circumstances, right? And so I've
Sure.
been literally working since I was 13 years old. um and what I found is, and I mean, I worked as a camp counselor, I worked in restaurants, I worked all while I went through high school. I moved out on my own right after I graduated from high school. And I really had my first opportunity to lead. Ironically enough, I was working at this restaurant, and one of my customers recruited me to come work for a retail organization and manage a retail organization. And I think for those of us who have started with retail, there are some real lessons to learn that are really applicable about how to build relationships. How to build a brand. I mean, when you work in a retail store in an urban area, like I worked in Chicago, right? There's you have to give people a reason to want to come to your store versus the store
Yeah.
that's three, literally three doors down. So how do you do that, right? And it's about building relationships, and it's about building brand. How do you get people to stay working for you? It's about the culture that you create within that store, and you don't think about it in that framework at the time, but looking back I can see that. So I was built out of retail. Ironically enough, um,
Mm.
I my now husband of 30 years, but then my baby's daddy knocked me up, and we weren't married quite yet. And this store that I worked in was a store that was in a high crime area, and so it had been robbed the fifth time at gunpoint. I was in the store, and I was very pregnant at the time, and I was like, okay, it's time to go.
Wow.
and
Wow.
and what am I going to go do? And God love him, my husband said, you don't really have to work. And I was like, yeah, I do. I need something to do. I can't just sit at home and be pregnant during this time. And so I went to a temp agency and said, I need something to do. I'm obviously pregnant. I'm moving to a different city in 5 months, but if you could figure out something for me to do, I'd be really grateful. And that's how I was introduced to recruiting.
Wow.
um and I fell in love with it. It was like, oh my gosh, I could talk to people all day, and I can help them find jobs, and I can make money at this. This is awesome. Right? This is a heck of a
Yeah.
gig. And I have this strong desire. So remember, I recognize from a very young age that careers can change people's lives. And so now I'd found a career where I could help other people do the same, right?
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and throughout the course of all this, so you asked for some key moments. So I think making that change was a key moment. Recognizing that work could literally change the trajectory of life was a key moment.
Mm.
I've been able
Mm.
to do that for other people, for my own family. I've changed the trajectory of my children's life. They certainly have a very different life than I did through working.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was important to me as I grew in my career to make sure that I not only gave that opportunity to people when I was recruiting, but for the people who worked for me. How could I develop them? How could I help shape them?
Yeah.
And so it became less about being a boss, and more about how do I continue to support and develop people? How do I get the best out of people? And this is not going to sound really popular. I think, and I'll take a step back before I say that. And so along the way, there were some developmental opportunities that I was presented. I took a stint as a project manager and learned deep project management skills. I've worked in every area of recruitment, landing,
Mm-hmm.
and that, from temp to perm to corporate. Spent 11 years in the recruitment process outsourcing business, where I helped major global companies with their recruiting framework. And so I think another one of those things that you learn on your path to leadership is really to lead from a place of your own strengths. Instead of focusing on the things that you don't do well, how about if
Yeah.
you just become laser focused on those things that you do really, really well? And
Mm-hmm.
you build a team of people around you who complement that, and you give them the space to do what they do really well, right? And that was a lesson that I learned as I came along, right? So I
Yeah.
built this kind of expertise in recruiting operations and driving large scale recruiting programs, and that's what I did really well, and that's what I stuck to. And I wasn't interested in kind of climbing the corporate ladder, and this leads to another pivotal point. um, I was very disillusioned with corporate America, right? Like
Yeah.
I was disillusioned with the politics. I had to make a decision. I wasn't going to play the game. It's just not how I'm wired. Um, and so I made this decision to kind of go into the recruitment process outsourcing, because I was like, I like what I do. I like building teams. I like solutioning recruiting. I've given up this, I'm going to climb and, be whatever. And I think the moment I decided I'm going to give
Mm-hmm.
up what I think success looks like, and I'm going to show up and be the person that I am, and I'm going to do what I do really well, and whatever happens, happens, is about the time that
Yeah.
my career took off.
Wow.
um, because you focused on, so now you're not spending this energy on architecting a version of yourself and trying to control and be that self. You're saying, here's how I show up, and so now I can spend all this energy leaning into my strengths and doing things really well. And I think that was
Yeah.
another pivotal moment, because I didn't recognize at the time that when you do that and you really show up as an authentic leader, and you show up being yourself, you
Yeah.
give permission for other people to be able to do that.
Mm.
And I remember the first time someone sat me down and said, a person that was, probably a level or two below me, and I was moving into a new job with our company, and before I left the location I was at, they said to me, you have shown us what it's like, that I can be different, I can be myself, and I can still be successful. And to me, that's the real
Mm.
compliment of a leader. It's making time to get to know people, it's giving them the space, it's understanding how you can develop them, but it's showing by
Mm.
example. And I think that made another pivot to me really wanting to focus on these dimensions of diversity and supporting people in that space. And I guess the last pivot I made that was kind of along that lines is, when I turned 40, it just amplified that. I was like, okay, I'm really done playing games now. And I know that I am a corporate, senior leader at that point. I hadn't hit the C-suite yet.
Yeah.
But for your audience, and John will get to see me, I'm sure there's a picture that'll go up somewhere. I probably am not what people picture when they picture an executive, right? Like, I am a Black woman with short hair and a nose ring and crazy glasses and big hoop earrings, and that's how I show up. And it's okay. and
Yeah.
and I think you make decisions, you realize there are consequences, but I think from a leadership perspective, which is what we're talking about,
Yeah.
when you have enough confidence to show up and say, this is how I show up in the world, and how you get the best out of me and how I get the
Mm.
best out of others is to let me show up the way I show up and let me do my thing. When you can
Mm.
find that place, there's so much value you add both for yourself and the people you're leading. So that's a really long answer to your question, but I hope it gives you some nuggets, and I hope it's interesting.
It's so interesting. No, that was wonderful. I have so many questions. I'm filtering through them, trying to pick one because I really loved what the person said to you though about that you showed them. I think it was how to be different, how to be yourself, and how to be successful. And you know what that reminded me of? I love Patrick Lencioni. Anyone who listens to my podcast knows I'm a massive fan of Patrick Lencioni's leadership books, and he talks about politics in organizations. And I love the way he talks about it because too often we think of politics as backstabbing, which it is, but he says politics is any time you are saying what you think someone wants to hear rather than what you really think.
For sure.
And that is so challenging to me. And what I love about your story is I hear a story of someone authentically living out uh, and leading from a place that would repel, I imagine, politics, which is must be so refreshing for the people you lead.
Well, here's what's really interesting, right? And I will say this. Um, it challenges politics, right? I don't know if it rebels
Mm.
it, but it certainly does challenge it. Um, and I do think what's very interesting is that what I have found in my career is a lot of times, like, you interview people and people will say, I want a leader who is going to be direct and open and honest and transparent.
Yeah.
And I'm all of those things. Um, and
Until it's direct and open and honest to me about something that I've done as the person that's being led. That is
exactly.
that.
Exactly, right? And then people are like, "Oh my god, she's too much. Like, this is way too much." And so it's interesting. People have very visceral responses to me. They either love me or hate me. But here's the deal. I am not in a popularity contest, right?
Mm,
I don't
yeah.
show up to work to gain friends. I have been blessed that I work with amazing people who I count as friends from years and even now, right? And that's a
Yes.
great byproduct of it. But that's not why I show up at work. I show up for work, and this is what I was going to say earlier that's not popular. So I don't show up
Mm,
to be your friend. What I do show up
mm,
is as a leader who, when I leave this earth, part of my legacy, I want people to say, I was a better person, either personally or professionally, because
yeah.
I worked with Rocki Howard, right? And if I've
Mhm.
done that, then I've done my job as a leader. And some of those people are not going to say, "Oh, I loved her." They're going to say, "I hated her, but you know what? She made me a better person." And that's okay.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think it's a challenge for leaders who are listening. One of my favorite lessons I've learned recently about marketing, and I'm very passionate about marketing and business development because that's really the space I came from, where I spent many years when I first graduated from school. And I'm really passionate about business development and marketing. And one of the things I've learned recently is that you have to be polarizing. You not for the sake of it. You don't want to be polarizing for the sake of being polarizing, but you have to embrace one of my favorite sayings recently that I think is a great challenging statement in marketing, but it goes for leadership is you got to choose who you lose.
No
Choose who you
kidding.
lose. There's someone's some group are not going to like you, and that's okay. You need to choose who that's going to be, choose who to lose, because in that, one of the points that I was really challenged on when I was reading about this was, the author said, think about someone that you follow on social media who you disagree with or even dislike, but you still follow them.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, wow, that's so true. I do have a bunch of those people. And I might even not, it's not just disagree. Sometimes there's something about them that really rubs me the wrong way, but I will keep watching what they do. And I think the encouragement is that, once again, it's not about to polarize for the sake of polarizing, but it's about being yourself, accepting that you'll be different and realizing that, great leaders what if we accept that great leaders are polarizing, and we accept that there's going to be people who don't like us, and the challenge is how can I be myself, accept where I'm different to other people, and choose who I'm going to lose. That's really hard to practice though.
It is very hard to practice. I love the way that you brought this up because I think of it this way, and I'm going to use a word that I hope won't offend anyone, but I hope in context you'll understand what it means. So, I was in a situation where I built one of the most diverse teams that my company had. We had 54% cultural diversity, um, 15% LGBTQ population, something like 12% veteran population. And it was such a group of people, and the culture was incredible. So people would ask me how to replicate this. Right across my country, across my company. Rocky, we want you to go to all these other centers and we want you to do it. Well, first of
Mm,
all, I can't clone myself, right? Like that's problem number one, because part of this is a reflection on me. But here's what we started to say to people. This is what changed the game. We threw out a lot of the traditional job descriptions and the requirements, and what we started to focus on, and this, like I said, the word may agitate some people, but you'll get where
mm,
I'm going. I used to
yeah.
say I'm a special brand of crazy, and so is our culture. And what we want here is we want people to be special brands of crazy. They just need to be complementary crazy, right? Just
Yeah.
it has to complement each other. And I say that
Mm,
to say people kind of would look at me when we started this kind of interview path, but the outcome was pretty obvious. And I think to your point, there are several people, and when I think about kind of taking your analogy all the way through, when I think about people that we interviewed, right? There were
mm,
people who interviewed and would send notes that, oh my gosh, I can't work for that person. I can't believe they said this or that in the interview, and that was horrible. And you're like, okay, we chose to lose you because you weren't going to be a right fit. There were other people who came through the interview process and went, like, once they got to know me, were like, oh my God, you terrified me in an interview process. And I didn't think you liked me, but I'm so glad to be here and I love who you are. Right. And so those people, to your point, kept listening and said, there's something here for me, and I could see how to work within it. And I could see that it's going to stretch me and grow me. And so I want to be part
mm,
of that mission. And so I do think, even when you think about cultures, we talk so much about the importance of culture. But then a lot
yeah.
of times when we see that someone is not culturally aligned, we're afraid to let them go. And one of the things that I used to say that was very unpopular is that our values are not something that sits on the wall. There's something we live and breathe. And you could be the highest
Yeah.
producing person in what you do. If you are not living our values, we will exit you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
And
just that simple.
that's where and that's one of my favorite things about values. It's another Patrick Lencioni idea, but he talks about true values are things you're willing to be punished for.
Absolutely.
And we all love nodding at that, going, yeah, but willing to be punished means a top producer, very competent, highly skilled person who's not values aligned, being exited. That's where the rubber hits the road.
Absolutely. And when you're willing to do that, I think you're in
Mm,
an elite group of leaders, because it's not an easy thing to do, and it's not always a popular thing to do. But your great
yeah.
people, and even your players, like, look, everybody is not a plus player, but my theory is, like, our businesses all need the B players. Those are the people who run the business, right? Like, those are the people who get all the work done. I love those players, right?
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
they are the steady eddies, they are the performers, they are the people who are dedicated to us, etc. When they see you actually living your values, guess what? Now you've created loyalty.
Yeah, that's so good, Rocky. One thing I wanted to jump back into from your story is I'm really struck by your resilience and how you grew up with such a challenging environment, and yet you have managed to be so successful, not only in work, but like you said, in the most important areas in terms of your, being married for 30 years and with your kids, and not to say that those who go through divorce aren't successful. That's not what I'm saying. But I just want to ask you about how so many of us know people who grew up in challenging environments but were never able to overcome it,
For
and it
sure.
follows them and they carry it everywhere. and often maybe we're the one in their team being led by them, going, if only they had dealt with something that they had early on in their life, maybe they would have been a better leader. I know this is a big question, but how were you able to deal with that challenging upbringing and yet turn it around in your life?
Yeah, there's a really easy answer for this. And so you saw me introduce myself with multiple dimensions of my diversity. And I there's two answers to your question that are there that really make this very simple. One is that I'm a Christian and I heavily lean on my faith and my belief in God to pull me through situations, and unabashedly Christian, right? Um, and
Mm,
so for me, that faith let me know that I always believed that God had a purpose for my life. And
mm,
I had to make a decision. And so this is the second part of this. And it's so funny. I
yeah.
remember a very specific day, and this came to me very early in my life. So to your
Mm,
point, one of my high school best friends, I spent a lot of time at her house. Her mom knew my situation. Um, there were parts of it that you couldn't hide and you couldn't see. Like when a kid shows up and she's got a, black eye, something is going on, right? And so she had been a
mm,
safe house for me, and she said to me one day when we were graduating from high school, she sat me down and she worked in the public school system here, and she said kind of the same thing you said. She said, "Look, I have all these kids who have gone through far less things than I know that you have experienced, that have taken a different path." And she's like, "You're always so happy. You're always so
mm,
appreciative. Like, you're going to be okay. Like, can you just tell me? Like, if I could just bottle it up and give it to others, can you just tell me?" And I remember at 18, not really, I don't think I understood then the magnitude of what I was saying, but I've lived my life this way. I said to
mm,
her, "I do believe that God has a purpose for my life, but more importantly, I get to choose. Like, I get to
yeah.
choose who I'm going to be in this world, and I choose this pathway I'm going down. And I refuse to give power to the people who abused me and let them
Mm,
own the rest of my life. I get to choose who I'm going to be." And I made a choice.
wow.
So I think for me, it is faith, um,
Yep.
and it was a choice. And certainly all of that has been um, supported and guided. And look, I'm not telling you it was easy. Let me just be really honest. It's not easy. It has not been an easy. It is not easy, and it wasn't all
Yeah.
sunshine and rainbows. There are so many people in my life who, once I made that choice, helped me get through all of the circumstances, all of the mental health challenges, all of the residuals that you have to deal with when you have those circumstances. So it hasn't been easy, but the truth is I made a choice and I choose that every single day.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing so vulnerably about your faith and about choosing. I This question pops into my mind, so I have to ask it for, say, for those listening who may have had a similar challenging upbringing in terms of some form of abuse, or it may be something where they're listening, going, "Look, what I've dealt with is nothing compared to Rocky, but gee, I do feel like I'm carrying baggage." How do you choose that every day? What would you say if someone was sitting across from you, if they were sitting with us and we were sitting over a coffee and they said, "Rocky, how do I feel like maybe I haven't been choosing that. How do I start really, doing what you're talking about, which you described at 18, which is choosing?" Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah. So first of all, let me just say this. Don't ever compare your journey to someone else's, right? Like what you feel and how you feel it could be just as
Mm,
catastrophic to you and have just as much impact on you. And it could be smaller, but like don't compare your experiences, right? I think that's the first really dangerous thing you do, because then you sit back
yeah.
and you go, "Oh, well, if Rocky could survive that, I feel really stupid going, oh, my boyfriend quit me and I feel devastated." No, that may be your cross to bear, right? Like that may be
Hmm.
your challenge, right? And so I think for me, it's really about reframing the circumstance and thinking about what do I want to be on the other side of it and can I get there? It also is about tapping into others and asking for help and support. It's about
Yeah.
being vulnerable. It's about keeping a therapist on speed dial if you need to.
Mm.
um, it's the best money you will ever spend. Um,
Yeah.
but I have this theory, right? Like that you just have to make a choice, and we make all kinds of choices, and I
Mm.
think ultimately it's, if you could you start to treat yourself in the same way that you would treat someone else. Like, I think we are so hard on ourselves, and especially as women.
Mm.
If someone's sitting across from you and says, "I'm really struggling with this, but I feel silly, and how do I do this?" You would give
Yeah.
them all kinds of grace and support, but we're unwilling to do that for ourselves. So what I would say to that person is be willing to give yourself the same grace and support you would give someone else, and know that I truly believe no matter what your religious, and I'm using quotes, um,
Mm.
affiliations are, I believe that there's always something bigger than us in the universe, and there's a
Yeah.
purpose while you're here. And so since you're here, why don't you choose? Are you going to be miserable, or are you going to choose to figure out what that purpose is, and let's do it together? I'm happy to help you.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Rocky. It's such a deep thought, and what you remind me of is what you've reminded me of, which in leadership is something that's really struck me recently, is the importance of the 360 degree. The getting the
Oh
view
yes.
from around. But I think in life, because that's why I love this conversation. Yes, it's about leadership, but I love breaking down you mentioned earlier Instagram. It's like if only we were forced to Instagram our worst days, right? Like that would be no one would probably want to watch because we've all got those moments in life where it's not Instagrammable because it's really hard. And I think that's what you don't see. And I think the challenge and the thing I'd encourage people to do off the back of what you said is to have 360-degree feedback and support. Who is ahead of you, who's supporting you, how are you listening to the people close to you. I think it's so much about having that feedback and that support. And we all know leaders. This is why I'm saying this. Like, let's not be the leader where people go, "Oh wow, they have such a blind spot."
Hmm.
And we know that people don't leave companies; they leave people. The people don't leave jobs; they leave people. And so yes, for that reason, but also just as a human being, invest in therapy, invest in great support around you, and then in your leadership journey, invest in 360-degree feedback. Find out once, as you grow, face some of those demons and go, okay, what do I do that really drives people insane? Um, and I think that's why I love coming back to that point of choosing. Just choose to 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 get support, to face yourself, to not make a choice to not be one of those leaders, like you said, right, back at the start. Let's be a leader who leaves a legacy where people go, I'm better because of Rocky, I'm better because of Jono. Not, you know what, they never faced their stuff, and as a result, I had a terrible time in their team.
For sure.
That's where this affects leadership.
For sure. And I don't want to belabor the point, but I will say this because I think it brings the two things that you were just talking to together. And I thought about something. So I had the privilege of going to IMD Business School in Switzerland for a period of time for an executive leadership training. Um, One of the things that they did that I thought was really interesting is exactly what you said. Not only did we go through 360 feedback, but the price for entry was to write this 25-page paper on what your life had been. And so what they really did was kind of merge the, here's who
Yeah.
I am as a person, and now, and you sat down with an IO psychologist and you started to learn how these things that I went through and how I developed as a human being in my personal life, how they really affect leadership. And so to
Yeah.
bring that all together, what you're saying is not just for the sake of this podcast. It's a proven methodology to help us understand how to be better leaders. If you understand yourself better and who you are, and what we call in our house your curves and edges, then you can be a better leader.
Yeah, I love that. That's so good. Well, we could go. We could keep talking for so long, and I would love to invite you back for another episode down the track, Rocky, because it's been such a joy, and I'm watching the clock, and that's the only reason I'm starting to wrap up because it's been such a joy. So the invitation is there.
It'd be
If
my
you'd like to come
pleasure.
back on, that would be wonderful. We'll definitely do that. Let's jump into Leadership Express to land today. I've got a few questions for you. Firstly, what's a book that you've gifted to other people?
The first 90 days. So the first 90 days,
Mm,
every time I not only go into a new role, a new job, but like in a new company, but when I go into a new role, it really is a great book to just be able to give yourself perspective and to set up what that looks like for yourself. So it is The First 90 Days by Michael D. Watkins.
wonderful recommendation. Thank you. Do you have any favorite questions that you ask your podcast guests or in one on ones or in interviews, in team meetings? Any favorite questions?
I I end every meeting with my team by asking how I can help and support. And I'm willing to not only listen, but then to actually do the work for the request.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. What's a recent leadership lesson you've learned for the first time or been reminded of?
Oh, um, wow, that's a really good one. You know what? It's about trusting yourself, and this is why. So, as I joined the Mom Project, our
Mm.
CEO was going out for maternity leave, and so guess who she handed most of her responsibilities to? Me. And I had been with the company 5 weeks at that point. And so, what I
Wow.
had to be reminded of is that I had transferable skills, that I had deserved the seat at the table, that she trusted me, that I had the right skills, and that I had to trust myself. And so, I think you have to
Mm.
really remember to reach out to those people. Don't be afraid to reach out for help. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to delegate those things that you think you may not be the best at, because real leaders, I believe, are vulnerable and honest, but you
Yeah.
also have to trust yourself and be willing to
Yes.
make decisions and stand behind the decision, even if it's the wrong decision. It was understanding, like, I made this decision, here's the thought process behind it. If it's wrong, you know what, I'll be accountable, no problem. But I made the decision, and I had a thought process behind it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Have you come across Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor?
Oh, yes, I have. It's been quite some time, but yes, I have.
Yeah, it's a great book. Yeah, I just had a thought because that book is a wonderful. Kim talks about challenge, how great leaders, if you think of a quadrant, great leaders do, high care and high challenge. So top left and bottom right would be high care, high challenge. And in the top right, they meet, and it's a leader who can do both. But you just made me think of using that same sort of quadrant, but around the challenge as leaders is to have that high humility and vulnerability and high confidence and trust in yourself. And it's a similar thing. It's like that radical, it's almost another element of candor. Instead of how we relate to people, it's about that ability to be humble and vulnerable enough to go, I could be wrong, what do you think, and yet at the same time realizing more and more, no, but you do also have to trust yourself. And then when you make a decision, own the decision and be able to. I always respect those generals that, there's one, I can't remember his name, but who would always say about these wars that he sort of led in where there was so much at stake, where people would say, how did you sleep at night? And he'd say, well, I knew that I'd done everything I could.
Absolutely.
And I was always like, how on earth? I struggle to do that when I'm just dealing with myself and some clients that I work with, let alone a war.
Oh, you're going
I
to learn how
respect
to do
that
that
so
with this
much.
new baby. That baby's going to teach you to
That's
do that.
that's right. I'll have some great recent leadership lessons I'll be learning from from becoming a father in coming weeks. Um, Well, yeah, that was just a great thought. I love what you said there, Rocky. Okay, one more question. Two more. I always have to ask this one. A movie or TV show that really impacted you?
Working Girl with Melanie Griffin. So it came out in the, I don't know, late 80s, early 90s. Melanie Griffin, Harrison Ford, and it was a pull her up by the bootstraps type of
Yeah.
movie. And I just saw myself. I always wanted to be Working Girl. And as a matter of fact, when I got my first promotion, it was I remember taking, like, when I got my first kind of director level role. I did
Yeah.
get an office where I had a bit of a view, and I remember sending a picture to my husband and said, "Hey, look, I'm a working girl now." Right? Love the movie.
Oh, that's great. I love asking that question. I always get the wonderful recommendations. Thank you. And okay, last question. If you could only give one piece of leadership advice to a young leader, what would you say?
Wow. Be authentic.
Mm,
Just, like, if there's only one thing to say, it's be authentic, because I think that authentic people can smell when you're not being authentic. And I think lack of authenticity
yeah.
can diminish your leadership legacy quicker than anything else. So I would say be
Mm.
authentic.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Wonderful advice. Well, for those who have just really enjoyed today's episode and have found some of the things you said really inspirational and challenging, where can people find you and your podcast, books, etc.? Where can people find you online, Rocky?
Yeah, so you can find me. I am probably most present on LinkedIn. It's Rocky with an I. So Rocky Howard. On social media, you can find me typically at Rocky Howard SPHR. Um, and the Voices of Diversity podcast is in every major podcast player. And the website is the voicesofdiversity.com.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. This has been just an episode, one of the ones I've enjoyed the most, to tell you the truth. It's been, I feel like I could have recorded for 3 hours. It's a sort of episode that honestly makes me question the length of episode I do, because it's been such a joy. So I hope it's also been wonderful for you listening. Don't forget, I also have the John O. White Leadership Podcast, which is more traditional tips on how to build a high performance team and how to cast vision, how to build a healthy culture, and the Leadership Question of the Day podcast, where I ask you a different question every day to put a stone in your shoe to make you uncomfortable. Because if we want to grow, we need to be uncomfortable as leaders. But I want to finish today by saying a massive thank you to Rocky Howard for being such a joy, for sharing so vulnerably, and for being that wonderful combination of, you know what, I think it's that radical candor. I think you nail high care. People know that you really care, but high challenge. You're very challenging, and I've enjoyed that so much. Thank you for coming on the podcast, Rocky.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for trusting me with your audience. Thank you for letting me show up and share a little radical candor. And I can't wait to come back and we'll do it again.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you. If you're going, not me, well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 Questions on Leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called the Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, Jono White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out Jono White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.